And now, from approximately coast to coast, Bob Elliott and Ray Goulding take pleasure in presenting the Bob and Ray Public Radio Program.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we are discussing Season 7, Episode 14, Here Comes the Bride, Again.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Here Comes the Bride, Again.
We open with Howard and Marion coming home from a wedding anniversary where the couple renewed their vows.
Two 50-year-old people, see, they get all dressed up, and they have a wedding ceremony in front of their children and their grandchildren, marching up and down the aisles like silly teenagers.
Marion found it sweet. Howard found it ridiculous and actually burst out laughing during the ceremony, humiliating Marion. She brings up that their own wedding anniversary is coming up soon, and she wants to have their own ceremony, like the Andersons.
It would be the best present that I ever had.
Howard finds the idea silly and goes upstairs to comb the rice out of his hair. Marion admits to Richie that all her life she wanted to have a real wedding. See, Marion and Howard got married at the Milwaukee bus depot 2 hours before Howard had to ship off for the army. And Howard had no time to get a ring, so he had to give Marion a peppermint lifesaver.
How could he do that?
Well, he'd sucked it just long enough to make the hole bigger.
Richie, now firmly on Marion's side, promises his mother a real wedding and goes to get Fonzie to help. 3 days later at Arnold's, Richie explains the situation and his idea to Fonzie, who had been busy with a date who chained herself to his couch. Fonzie likes the idea so much he gives Richie the rare double thumbs up.
A double?
You deserve it.
Thank you.
Howard shows up, upset that Marion has been asking about a second wedding ceremony and claiming she must have gotten the idea from someone else.
Probably one of those ding-dong friends of hers.
Well, probably not exactly a ding-dong.
Fonzie takes Howard into his office and says he's disappointed in Howard's selfishness. After everything Marion does for Howard, he's concerned about looking silly.
Silly, Mr. C.
Richie comes in to tell Howard Marion is here, and having realized that he is in fact a selfish bum, Howard decides to go ask Marion to marry him.
I don't have to make any speeches. I know what to say. I love you. Will you marry me?
Yes.
A few days later, Richie is planning the wedding when the doorbell rings. It's wedding planners Gil Crawford and Bernie Cross, recommended by Al.
Oh, yeah, we haven't seen him in years.
He's still good looking.
Richie explains this wedding will be a renewal of vows, and they'll be having it in the backyard. Gil and Bernie are also both ordained ministers, and neither one of them could perform the wedding. They're also both caterers.
We're also notary publics.
That's where the money is.
But as Richie talks to them, they're frequently distracted by bantering with one another. Fonzie arrives, and Gil and Bernie are both instantly more professional.
You all set on what we need?
Oh, yeah, sure. Renewal of vows, 30 or 40 people, backyard.
Food, tuxedos, flowers. See you Sunday.
After they leave, Fonzie scolds Richie for getting so worked up. The day of the wedding, the backyard is beautifully decorated, and also there's a clown.
What's that clown doing?
Cartwheels.
Richie confronts Gil and Bernie, who say the clown goes over very well at kiddie parties. Also, speaking of clowns, Chachi has been hired as the photographer.
Come on, Rich, I'll do a good job. You gotta see the great shots I took of the clown.
Richie runs off to check on his parents. Ralph and Potsy, whose suits were provided by Gil and Bernie, are unfortunately stuck in suits several sizes too small.
How could that catering outfit make such a mistake on our suits?
Maybe we put them on wrong.
The Cunningham's neighbor, Mr. Burkhart, pokes his head over the fence to snap at Richie about a fire in the bathtub. Sure enough, there's a bathtub over which Gil, Bernie, and Al are cooking hot dogs. Richie, on the verge of a nervous breakdown, tries to call off the wedding. Fonzie stops him, telling him not to ruin such a lovely affair.
Honest, we can't stop the wedding because if you just look around, I mean, you see the guy. Look, they're cooking things over there. Richie.
Calmed by Fonzie, Richie starts the wedding. Ralph plays the organ as Potsy sings, and Richie gets rid of the clown. Fonzie walks Marion down the aisle, and then Gil and Bernie read the vows in unison.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sight of our Creator.
Richie interrupts, apologizing to his parents because he just wanted to give his mother something wonderful, and something that wouldn't embarrass his father. Marion assures him that she won't remember the details years from now. What she'll remember is the love. She will remember the clown, though. Howard calls for the wedding to continue. He's only half married now. As Gil goes to check the burning hamburgers, Bernie continues the vows.
Wilt thou have this man to be thy wedded husband, live together after God's ordinance in the holiest faith of heaven? Wilt thou love him?
And then the fire department shows up. Nevertheless, the ceremony continues, and Howard and Marion are pronounced man and wife. After the wedding, Gil and Bernie give Fonzie their bell.
That's a real stinger, huh?
Then the Cunninghams and their friends, led by Fonzie, toast to another 25 years.
Thank you, Peter. That was Here Comes the Bride again. It first aired back on December 18th, 1979. Happy Days was followed by a new Angie, in which Angie's coffee shop is threatened by the arrival of a new fast food restaurant. This was the last time Happy Days was followed by Angie. ABC would move the show to Monday nights, then Saturday nights, and finally Thursday nights before canceling it outright. NBC aired the animated special Casper's First Christmas, in which Casper the Friendly Ghost meets such Hanna-Barbera characters as Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, Snagglepuss, and more, plus an unfriendly ghost named Harry Scary.
Who's you-know-who that's coming?
Why, Santa Claus, Harry! Santa Claus!
This was followed by a family circus Christmas based on the comic strip. CBS went with a new episode of its drama, The White Shadow. About a retired white NBA star, played by Ken Howard, who coaches basketball at an inner-city high school in South Central Los Angeles. In this episode, one of the players learns his ex-girlfriend is now a prostitute. By the way, this was the last Happy Days episode to air during the 1970s. After Here Comes the Bride Again, the show would go on holiday break and come back on January 8th, 1980.
It's the 80s. Do a lot of coke and vote for Ronald Reagan.
So, Peter, of those choices, Happy Days, Casper's First Christmas, and The White Shadow, what are you watching?
Well, I'm not much of a Casper head, but I do like the idea of him fighting an unfriendly ghost, so that's what I'm going with.
As a kid, I definitely would have been attracted to the Casper Christmas special, mainly because of the participation of Yogi Bear, Snagglepuss, etc.
To make sure I get what I want, I buy my gifts for me.
As an adult, I could not resist the lure of Bob and Ray being on Happy Days, so I'm watching that. Here Comes the Bride Again was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Bob Howard. We've talked about Bob before. He wrote Married Strangers, The First Thanksgiving, and Dance Contest. As for guest stars this week, we have Bob and Ray. Bob Elliott as Gil Crawford and Ray Goulding as Bernie Cross. Bob and Ray were a popular radio comedy team starting in Boston in the 1940s. They continued all the way into the 1980s when Ray's health forced them to retire the act. Together, Bob and Ray hosted numerous local and national radio shows, including a memorable stint on NBC's Monitor in the 1950s. Over the years, they've perfected a low-key, deadpan style of comedy, much of it improvised, that was hugely influential on a whole generation of other comedians, including David Letterman, Johnny Carson, and the casts of Saturday Night Live and SCTV. Among their best-loved characters were reporter Wally Ballou.
Wally Ballou is standing by in Napoleon, Ohio, with a report. Come in, please, Wally Ballou.
Lee Ballou here in Napoleon, Ohio.
Homemaker Mary Margaret Magoon, and the McBeebe twins, not to mention Harry and Mary Backstage, who had their own ongoing soap opera.
The story of America's favorite family of the Footlights and of their fight for security and happiness against the concrete heart of Broadway.
Though best known for radio, Bob and Ray did make forays into other media. They had their own extremely low-budget TV show on NBC in the early 1950s, for instance, and they successfully brought their act to Broadway in the 1970s with a show called The Two and Only. Bob and Ray also appeared in the movies Cold Turkey and Author. Plus, they made countless appearances as guests on late-night talk shows. On the side, Bob and Ray had a very profitable career in advertising, beginning with their successful campaign for Peel's Beer, in which they provided the voices for the animated characters Harry and Bert Peel.
I've got it, Harry boy, the slogan. To the brothers Peel, others kneel.
Well, that doesn't say anything about how good our beer is. Peel's is delicious.
Serve Peel's with your meals.
Ray Goulding died in 1990. On his own, Bob Elliott was a regular on the 90s sitcom Get a Life, starring his son, comedian Chris Elliott.
Mother, father, as you both know, today is my birthday.
How old are you anyway, 50?
Bob also appeared in the movies Cabin Boy and Quick Change. Bob died in 2016. Peter, were you at all familiar with the comedy of Bob and Ray before this episode?
I had heard of them, but I wasn't super familiar with their work, and I had to admit this episode did kind of make me want to seek out more of them. Also, I love when I can tell that you're a huge fan of the people we're talking about because it just comes through so beautifully in your description.
Bob and Ray have been an obsession of mine for quite a long time. What I found was that a lot of the comedians that I liked and respected and enjoyed would list Bob and Ray as a huge influence on them. So I decided to go right to the source and just listen to a bunch of Bob and Ray. In this episode, you get a little hint of what Bob and Ray are like.
You didn't attend my wedding, did you?
I wasn't invited. You know, if you had invited me, I would have been at your wedding.
Obviously, this show was written around them and was written as sort of a tribute to their career. We have a couple more guest stars this week, both sort of intriguing. We have Rance Howard, that's Ron's dad, as Mr. Burkhart.
Kind of loud, isn't it? It's a party. You know parties. No, I don't. Never have them, never go to them.
Rance had previously appeared in the episodes Dance Contest and Spunkless Spunky. This was Rance's last appearance on Happy Days, but he would remain a ubiquitous character actor in film and TV for the rest of his life. He died in 2017. What did you think of this final performance of Rance Howard on Happy Days?
It was a fun little cameo. I like that he was the one who pointed out that there was a small fire in the backyard, controlled but still.
I thought this was very typical of the kind of parts that Rance usually plays. I like that he was especially grumpy and hard to get along with this week, so I thought it was a fitting send-off for Rance Howard. And last but not least, we have C.W. Metcalf as the clown. C.W. does not have any more movie or TV credits, but is quite accomplished as a clown and mime in real life. He's currently an author and motivational speaker who lectures on the use of humor to relieve stress.
My name is C.W. Metcalf, and I know you're saying to yourself, C.W. Metcalf? Who is that?
His book is called Lighten Up, Survival Skills for People Under Pressure. So, Peter, what did you think of C.W. Metcalf as our clown?
I think some of the best humor in this episode came from him. Maybe not so much from him as from people's reaction to him, just because of the absurdity of having a clown at a wedding.
I also think that was one of the best running jokes in this episode, having this random clown in the middle of this wedding. I don't know that C.W. Metcalf got to use his vast array of clowning skills, but it was nice that he got this gig on Happy Days. As for songs, this is a music-heavy episode. We hear It's Now or Never, a #1 hit for Elvis Presley in 1960. The melody comes from O Sole Mio. We also hear Theme from a Summer Place by Percy Faith.
Theme from a summer place, from a summer place, the theme from a summer place.
This too was a #1 hit in 1960. I Love You Truly is performed by Anson Williams.
I love you truly, dear.
This song goes back to 1901 and was written by Carrie Jacobs Bond.
Hey, I think it's turned out better than the Carrie Jacobs Bond album we did last week.
It was originally marketed as a so-called parlor song, meant to be performed by amateurs in their own homes, working from sheet music. It has since become a staple at weddings. And of course, people hear it every Christmas because it's used memorably in the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
I love you truly, truly, dear.
We also hear the bridal chorus from the 1850 opera Lohengrin by German composer Richard Wagner, and the wedding march composed by Felix Mendelssohn in 1842. Both are allegedly being performed by Donnie Most. I'm not sure if Don actually does his own piano playing in the show. He's shown playing the piano quite a lot, so I don't know if he does his own piano playing or not. What do you think?
It could go either way, I think. I figure that both pieces of music are fairly easy to learn, I assume. I know nothing about music, but lots of people know them.
We hear the bridal chorus and the wedding march. I have never heard either one of those at a real wedding.
Yeah, because they're cliches. It's like naming your dog Fido. Nobody actually knows anyone who named their dog Fido, but it's a thing you name your dog.
In movies and TV shows, but not in real life. As for cultural and historical references, Marion's first wedding ring was a peppermint lifesaver. Peppermint is the oldest flavor of lifesavers. It was introduced in 1912 and marketed as Crane's Peppermint Lifesavers. The next year, it was renamed Pep-O-Mint.
When do you most enjoy having a Pep-O-Mint lifesaver?
Before.
After. I think it's in between.
Well, 3 opinions.
The fruit flavors did not come along until 1921, and they didn't even have holes at the beginning. Are you a fan of lifesavers?
Yeah, but I'm not really much of a peppermint fan.
But they were the OG lifesavers. They were like the original lifesavers.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, lifesavers. I just don't like peppermint.
Richie tells Marion she could win big bucks on Queen for a Day. This was a game show that began on radio in 1945 and jumped to television 3 years later.
Would you like to be queen for a day?
It's been revived several times since. Basically, female contestants share their sad stories, and the woman judged most pitiful by the audience wins a prize.
Which is really freaking ghoulish. This is what capitalism does to people. It makes you go on TV and make yourself look pathetic just for the hope of maybe winning some money. And if you get judged as not pathetic enough, then congratulations, you humiliated yourself for nothing.
It has to be seen to be believed, and even after you see it, you might not believe it.
And we actually are going to get an episode sort of about that later on in Happy Days?
They do a full-on Queen for a Day simulacrum with Lyle Wagner hosting it. The scene where Bob and Ray keep asking for information that Richie has just given them.
The wedding is for my parents, and, well, we thought we'd just have it right out here in the backyard.
Yeah. See, that's a lovely idea. You're going to hold it in a church?
Is based on a classic Bob and Ray sketch called The Komodo Dragon. In that sketch, Ray plays an oblivious interviewer talking to a Komodo dragon expert played by Bob.
We have 2 Komodo dragons which were given to us some years ago by the late former premier of Indonesia, Sukarno.
I believe I read somewhere where a foreign potentate gave America some Komodo dragons.
And it was supposedly inspired by a real-life reporter that they had seen who obviously was not listening to his guest.
Ha!
The scene where Bob and Ray speak almost but not quite in unison is based on their popular recurring characters, the McBeebe twins, who were non-identical twin band leaders.
Claude and Clyde, the McBeebe twins. How are you, men?
Oh, just great, Bob and Ray. Things are going along just fine for us.
What have you been doing since we saw you last?
Well, we have an ice cream truck
out here in the suburbs.
Other observations, if Howard and Marion are celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary, they must have gotten married in 1936. I don't know if that meshes with previous episodes, and frankly, at this point, I don't care.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I don't think it contradicts anything directly, although I'm not sure if it necessarily meshes with the idea that Howard had to immediately go because the army needed him.
The bus driver said all aboard and the sergeant was yelling, "Let's go, Cunningham, get your keister on the bus." You know what keister means, don't you, Richie?
Yeah, I know.
I know that there was a draft in 1936, but were we at war with anyone in 1936?
No, so I'm not sure why he was needed so desperately. I am curious, though, what Richie is eating in that first scene. It looks like a burnt grilled cheese sandwich, but the interior is white. Did you see
Maybe it's a grilled cheese sandwich with mayo? Richie seems like he'd be a big mayo fan.
I'm pleasantly surprised that the show hasn't forgotten about Germaine, and she appears on camera for a second time.
Yes, Germaine, Al's paramour.
We get a lot of references to Germaine, but we don't really find out too much about her.
She has a dog who apparently doesn't like Al.
Oh, yeah. But the relationship between Al and Germaine is not going anywhere.
But on the bright side, Al's going to marry someone else soon. No spoilers as to who.
I like that they kept the moment where Ron Howard fumbles with the kitchen door. It adds some realism to the show, and it gets an extra laugh out of the audience.
Hi, Joni.
Hi.
It's just a little moment, but I noticed it. And for the record, this episode turned 25 in the year 2004, and all the cast members were still alive at that time. They did a reunion special the very next year. So Fonzie's wish?
I hope that we're all here, happy, smiling, 25 years from now when the C's do this one more time.
Came true.
Aww.
Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
Sadly, no. I was hoping that the wedding would give us a chance for some really pretty stuff, but nothing was really outstanding, sadly.
Other than the undersized tuxedos being worn by Potsy and Ralph.
Those were very stylish.
They were complaining about them, but I think in another context, those would actually be quite becoming.
Yeah, you know how at fashion shows, sometimes you'll see models wearing these big, bulky tuxedos with giant shoulders? I feel like we're due for a reverse of that, of models wearing tight-fitting suits that only come down to their thighs and make them look like adults pretending to be children, like Martin Short and Clifford.
If you are about to say what I think you're about to say, then I don't want to hear it.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
This episode was a blast from beginning to end. I like that it serves as a great affirmation of Howard and Marion's love for each other, as Howard has to basically overcome his desire to not be seen as silly in order to give Marion something that she's wanted for so long but hasn't been able to have. And Richie and Joni and Fonzie coming together to give Howard and Marion this wonderful moment. And also it's got plenty of really nice gags. So I like that they found a balance between heart and humor for this one.
I love this episode. I was predestined to love it because Bob and Ray are in it, but this tells a very sweet story about Howard and Marion. I noticed that Bob Howard, the writer of this episode, also wrote Married Strangers and Dance Contest, so he's focused on Howard and Marion's stories. I think there's a lot of humor and heart and pathos to be mined from the marriage of Howard and Marion Cunningham, and I think this episode does it beautifully. And then there's just the insanity of this wedding ending where all kinds of crazy things go wrong. There's a fire and there's a clown and there's all this chaos going on everywhere, and it just escalates through the whole episode. So for me, Here Comes the Bride Again was definitely a highlight of this season. I very much enjoyed this episode. So Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Wolfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Richie takes his friends on a camping trip, and it doesn't go as planned in a wilderness.
And we'll get to see if Happy Days is ready for the 1980s. Until then, this is Joe reminding you to write if you get work.
And this is Peter reminding you to hang by your thumbs.
We've been told that a lot of young people may be tuned in, and to keep them tuned in, we should do something along the lines of disco music.
Of course, I can't stand disco. I still prefer the acid rock of the late 60s. The Dead, the Airplane, Hot Tuna, Hendrix. This disco stuff sounds like a lot of noise to me.
Well, our producer prevailed, however, so Ray and I, with Jane, Lorraine, and Gilda, would like to do a little tune for you.
Would you like to be queen for a day?